Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Kieran and I'm a VP of Global Customer Transformation here at ServiceMax. Today, I've got 15 minutes to just briefly run through how asset centricity and data from the asset is accelerating industrial service delivery. So to get on with this 15 minutes, I'd like to first talk about digital transformation. Now, digital transformation is a phrase that's used very often in our workplace and many other workplaces as well. But for me, let's really think about this. I mean, the digital piece is just here, right? Everything nowadays is digital. Everything between the B2C and the B2B market is focused on that digital offerings. Our children today work in and live and play in a digital environment. So for me, the whole conversation really here is about transformation. And there's two elements for me for transformation. There's the transformation that we undergo every day where we're looking for those marginal benefits to improve the performance, the output, the customer experience that we currently run today. It is just a small transformation to make it ever better than it is. But then there's the second piece, which is a true transformation, where a business actually takes its business model and changes that to something totally different. And that, in this aspect, if we look at the next slide, might describe one or two of these elements. So if we think about years ago, and still for many businesses, right, service was run as just a cost center. It was described as after sales. It was the full reason for it was a necessary evil, if you like, to maintain the saleability of your products. So the focus was really on the products and then service just to actually keep those products running. So it was a sort of break fix environment. And then we've seen over the last 3-5 decades, right, this whole difference, this service as a differentiator. It started to charge for its services. It started to become a revenue stream. And in some cases, it became greater revenue stream than sales. I mean, for me personally, I was always astounded back in the 90s, where the company I worked for in the late 90s, the service actually overtook the sales revenue. Yet there was no chief service officer sitting at the C-suite table. They were still missing because service wasn't seen as a more or as important element of the business. But I mean, obviously things have changed a lot since that time. And then we look at our third element, which is service as a product. Now we look at service as a product, right? We're really talking about the output, everything that happens around that. So is the focus service as a product, or is it really output? It's about the asset and providing that asset's output. And then we as a service business maintain and enable that asset to deliver that output for your customers. Therefore, it's a much nicer way of actually getting skin in the game for both the customer and the service provider. It's a true partnership. And we'll look at some other elements of that as we go through. But this is really about that data driving those better decisions. So let's look at this, right? Very basic slide showing how we would get the data in past times, if you like. We get 20%, and these are just percentages to make the story a little bit more understanding, but generally we would get 20% from the customer. And again, it would be a perception from the customer as well. It would rarely be the true facts because the customer didn't have that service knowledge. So they would give you the information that they had. It's broken, it's making this noise, it's running hot, it's this part of the product. That's the sort of information you would get from them. And then the technician would then fill in the majority of the blanks around that. This is what I needed to do. This is how I fixed it. This is what we used. And then lastly, they would generally take information from the asset as well. And then you would put that together and you end up with a block of data. Now, the trouble with that block of data in many respects is it may have been in text form, which makes it very difficult to use. Or you may have been using drop downs for technicians to report on the right areas. But as we know and we've seen in our past experiences, if you have a list of drop downs, the technician doesn't know why all this data is being collected, doesn't see any benefits from it. So then all of a sudden you start to see that data become corrupt because the technician will just put in the top drop down or other, for example. So then, we have to think about that because we need this data. So now we look at how businesses structure themselves today. So we think about the customer. Well, the customer's still supplying that data, but maybe a little bit less, right? But a little bit less data, but more exact, more relevant data, because we've got triage models. We've got AI prompting the certain questions to get certain answers to then understand the next question. And we do that when we work with the customer. Then, of course, the technician. And then you're seeing here, right, a big drop in the value of the technician's information. It's still very relevant. The technician is, if you like, you know, the sixth sense, the final sense to sense check every other sense or automated process you've put in place in your business. But the more important data really now comes from the asset. The asset doesn't have memory issues. The asset doesn't have egos. The asset just tells you the data that it has in matter of fact. Now that may be a problem because you need to utilize that data and then turn that into something actionable. But that's the important piece, right? The asset only tells you the data that it has, and it doesn't exaggerate, it doesn't tell you lies, it doesn't do any of those things that humans can actually do by accident or on purpose, but it just gives you those facts, right? And that's really important because that then starts to give you a much bigger lump of data, but data that is, again, factual and usable. Now, if we look at a 2018 study that was done by Manson and Bourne, right, we can see here many elements of where companies struggle with the data issue, right? How do I use it? How do I store it? How do I analyze it? How do I create actions from it? And this is quite relevant, right? Because you have to understand why or what you want this data for. You have to make sure that everybody in the whole structure of understanding this data knows what it's for. Because without that, you'll never get reliable data. So it's really important to make sure everybody understands why, and you understand what goals you want to fix with that data, rather than just collecting data and drowning in it. So we look at, why do we collect this data? What are the things that we really want to do? Well, if we start simply, right, every service business, whether it be a cost model, revenue model, or indeed an outcome services, right, you need to understand how you can fix a problem before it becomes an actual failure. So if we look simply at this PF curve, so potential failure versus functional failure, right, we want to capture the failure as far left as possible. The trouble is, the likelihood is we're looking at the far right, because if we look at our standard model, we only really understand when that equipment fails because of visual inspection or the fact that it's actually broken, right? And the report comes in from the customer. So then if we think about it, right, we've got that visual inspection, we can work from there. But then before that, we've got instrument inspection, which could be just on the asset itself. Or of course, if we move a little bit further left, you might have some condition monitoring, right? You may have cycles, you may have outputs, you may have a connected device from very simple monitors and various elements, understanding, capturing certain data. And then again, when we move further left, right, we've got that predictive nature. So now we're really looking at that data we're collecting. We're really understanding where we've positioned those sensors and aggregating data from many sensors to understand what that potential failure is before it becomes a functional failure. And then we can remodel things like, you know, we all have maintenance plans, but those maintenance plans have come from a manufacturing department or R&D where the life of the product hasn't actually started yet. So this ability to be predictive, but also to be reactive and realign those experiences of understanding how accurate was that manufacturing maintenance plan versus a true maintenance plan, because now you've seen how these products are being used in the field. So again, and the reason for this is you know, quite obvious. At the end of the day, the further left we can capture this repair, the cheaper it becomes for us. And also, you know, you've got to think about the customer aspect. If that equipment actually fails, that's a big problem for the customer. And if we look at the predictive maintenance from big data analytics, again, 2017 is a little bit old, but the principle's the same. You can see the detail that they came up with around the percentages of benefit of understanding how much you can save if the further left you can move this. And you know, they reckon unplanned work is 7 times more expensive than planned work. That's a huge amount of money. Okay, so if If we're thinking about that, right, that is one of the biggest drivers, okay? How we keep those machines running better and more efficiently. If we now look at another piece of research, this was done by Forrester Consulting. It shows there's a statement about, you know, the value from equipment and service data will exceed the actual value of the equipment in 5 years. Now, that was in 2019. Now, I'm not 100% sure you'll all agree with that statement, but personally speaking, I can really understand where they're coming from. And I really understand businesses that start to see that value. Now, currently, we're all sitting here thinking, you know, how service can improve a service business by taking all of that service data and then utilizing it to improve that service delivery. But what if we look a little bit further afield? Okay, what about who else can use that data? Now, I know this is a very busy slide, but it gives you the understanding of where we're sort of going with this. You take service data, right? If you look at supply chain, for instance, you take very simple service data like the maintenance program, right? So hopefully you've moved away from periodic maintenance, all right? So, you know, we service your machine every 12 months, 6 months or whatever, because obviously machines get used differently. You could have one machine running 7 hours a day, 5 days a week versus another machine running 24 hours, 7 days a week. Why would you do a maintenance program on these two products at exactly the same time, right? For me, you wouldn't. You would align that. So either you're not over servicing one or you're not under servicing the other, causing breakdowns. But if we think about that, you have that plan. You have your maintenance interval plan, right? If you then take that maintenance plan and give it to your supply chain, now all of a sudden they have a proactive plan to follow. So they can actually supply you rather than being a demand chain, and they can supply you with those parts when you require them, specifically when you require them. So it's a much better relationship between the two parts of your organization. Again, if we look at marketing and sales, having that asset data is huge, right? You can do targeted marketing campaigns, not generic. You understand when a throughput of a machine is at its upper limit, and that may cause maybe a field change order to improve the throughput of the machine, or maybe, you know, allow sales to actually understand that this customer needs another asset. So again, the sales and obviously the life cycle, the older assets, refreshing them. You have all that data at hand. If just the next one, for example, asset performance, R&D, right? You have all of that data of what breaks, when it breaks. You know, does that £100 part or $100 part or €100 part create 7 hours of labor? You know, would it be better to change the assembly in only 15 minutes of labor and then repair that back in the workshop? There are so many different aspects that you can take from that data. That data is not just belong to service. It belongs to the whole business, and it should be used by the whole business, right? To make sure that you are doing the best you can for your whole company. And again, when you do that, if you think about everything I've just said, right? So supply chain, if you can improve the supply chain improves your service performance, you know, better first time fix, less back orders, right? The right parts, the right place. If you think about the commercial element that I mentioned there about marketing and sales, if sales sell more machines, service get more contracts, okay? R&D, the performance there for R&D. If R&D understand that data and improve the machines, right, from your aspect as well, then all of a sudden you improve your mean time to repair. You have less visits to your customers. Again, all of that is improving your service offering and improving the overall experience from you to the customer and for you to your own employees. So seeing as we're running out of our 15 minutes, right, and I know this has been a little bit of a whirlwind stop on digital transformation and the data required to transform, right, I'm just going to try and leave you with a few key takeaways. So my first takeaway really is data is necessity for continual improvement. You need that data, but you need to be careful with it as well. You hear phrases of dirty data lake, right? And you hear phrases of, I've got so much data, I don't know what to do with it. Okay, so that's really where then I lead into my next point. Establish the KPI and the benefit that you really, really want to drive, and then understand the data you need. All right, a lot of people just see loads of data and have so many ideas, but don't focus on one thing at a time. And then when you do that, communicate. Now, this communication is to everybody in the process. It's to the technicians, it's to the back office, it's to the management, it's to sales, it's the supply chain, it's for anyone that is involved. And the reason you communicate is because if you can communicate why you're doing it and the value that it's going to bring to your business, then those people will be more mindful of the data they collect. They will make sure it's more accurate and relevant because they understand why they're doing it. They understand the value that they're bringing because they're doing it, and they understand the value to the company, right? And that leads that into the next point. It's publish your improvements. Show people the positive impact they have had. And if you can show them the positive impact they have had in collecting that data, in transferring that data into actionable actions, if that's a phrase, right? That will really help you deliver the benefits and the transformation that you want to do. Okay, so my 15 minutes are up. I'm going to leave you there, right? But if you look on the left-hand side, very simple, www.servicemax.com is obviously our website. And if you'd like to reach out to me directly, please feel free. My email's there, and I'd love to go through anything else with you in the future. Thank you very much and take care.